Okay, so just before we begin, we do have an ASL interpreter, and if you're interested in spotlighting that person, you can go to in the list of participants, select ASL interpreter, and then there are the three dots there to the side, and you can pin it for yourself or spotlight for everyone. And if you have any issues with that, if you could just message Allison Gregory. She'd be available to help you with that. Thank you.
Are you ready for me, Stacy?
I'm going to go ahead and click over here and share the slide deck. And yes, Susan, go ahead, take over.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Glass normally speaks with us on these calls, but he's unable to be with us today. So we are just going to jump into everything. Hope everyone has had a good start back to the school year and are maintaining their sanity and excited about this new year. Okay, so we'll start with the roll call. You want to go down to that slide? There we go. So please unmute yourself whenever you hear your name so we can make sure that you're here. Misty Bivens. Byron Wilson.
He's here.
Susan here. Who was that? Jen Davis. Is that Jen?
I'm here.
Okay. Thanks. Tiffany Dunn. We get Tiffany. Okay, Sarah Green.
Here.
Alan Hensley. Okay, Kaysen Higgins. April Jackson.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, April. Quentin Johnson. Okay, Amanda Claire. Okay, Amy Leesgang. Charlene Martin. Do I hear Charlene? Okay. Jane Modlin.
Jane Maudlin, I'm here.
Thank you, Jane. Erica Deal.
I'm here, present.
Thank you. Abigail Nash. Okay, Kim Saylor. Okay, Gregory Smith.
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. Jennifer Stewart.
I'm here.
Hi, Jennifer. Jamal Stiles.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Taylor Sullivan.
I'm here.
Taylor. Beverly Rutledge.
Here.
Hi, Beverly. And Scott Osborne.
If I could get my mic. There you go. Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning, Scott. Awesome. Okay, thank you all. Next up, we have several members who are cycling off. Either their term is over or they've taken on a new position. So I wanted to take a minute to say thank you all so much for serving your time here and lending your voice to this committee. We appreciate you very, very much. Those members, yes?
We've been asked that everybody needs to turn their cameras on.
Oh, okay.
If you wouldn't mind to flip your camera on, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good. Thank you. But thank you all, Tiffany, Alan, Quentin, Abigail, Kim, Taylor, Beverly, Wade, Angela, and Brooke. All of them will be cycling off after this meeting. This will be their last meeting with us. So thank you all so much. And we've already had, I think, over 100 applications for these 10 spots come in from across the state. So that's kind of a pretty exciting event, I think, to have more people coming on. So we'll have lots of new members on our next meeting in December. Okay, Next up, if you all could take a moment.
I'm sorry. I needed to check in. My principal hadn't come in yet, and you guys had already passed my name. It's Amanda Claire. I am here.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so if you guys could just take a second, click on the link. If you have the PowerPoint up, there's an attendance link there. So just click on that and make sure that we register your attendance that way. And as always, if you have transitioned into another spot, okay. If you have transitioned into another spot, then make sure you let Stacy know so we can fill that position. Okay, and next up on the next slide is the link to our meeting minutes from the last meeting in June. And if you guys could take a second to look those over, and I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Are there any questions on the minutes? Are you still looking?
This is April Jackson. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jackson.
You're welcome.
Is there a second?
This is Beverly Rutledge. I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Rutledge. And all those in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion, the minutes from last session are passed. Okay, on to the business of this meeting. We have with us Jocelyn Waddle from the National Board Group to speak to us about some of the issues with our National Board Pilot Program. All right, are you there, Jocelyn?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciate so I can speak to this great opportunity that we have in Kentucky. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we do have a new grant that is in conjunction with the National Board of Professional Teaching Standard. We are the only one in the United States. Kentucky has been chosen as the recipient of this grant, which is great news for us in Kentucky. And also to be recognized at the national level as having such a leading capacity with our NBCTs. So this grant is called Accelerate Accomplished Teaching. And what is different is before this new initiative, you needed to have at least 3 years of successful teaching in order to become a national board candidate. And this is changing. So now you can start the process as early as your first year of teaching, which is very exciting, of course. This will allow 100 of our early career educators that have between 1 and 3 years teaching experience with a unique professional learning that will support them toward their candidacy. So we know that in Kentucky, when we talk about Kentucky leading the way, just to give you a quick overview, in the national ranking, Kentucky ranked 8th with 4,182 NBCTs. We rank also 8th in the number of new NBCTs as of the last cycle, which ended up in December, and then we ranked 7 in the renewal of National Board certification. So next slide, please. So why is it important to be an NBCT? Well, for several reasons, but I think the most important one is that in terms of having a direct impact on our student, we know as we have a 10-year body of research that shows that, for example, kindergarten students taught by NBCTs are 31% more likely to achieve a proficiency score on the kindergarten readiness assessment. Third graders also 11% more likely to achieve a proficiency score on the MAP test in English language art. So we also know that people who go through the National Board certification, all of them say that it completely changes our practice, right? You are becoming such a reflective practitioner, and you are able to really quickly, I think, adjust. I think we've seen that with during the pandemic, where our NBCTs were able to kind of roll with a punch and support other teachers along the way. The standards and everything that is being created by the National Board for Professional Teaching Standard is created by teacher for teachers. So that makes it extremely relevant. I think everybody that goes through certification, one of the first things we hear is, oh, I'm already doing that, or I can recognize my practice in this. So it's not this idea that you have to be this perfect teacher in order to go through certification. I think it's more of a pat in the back saying you're already doing this. It's helping you, I think, along the way in your career. It changes our practice because at the core of the standards, it's all about the students, right? And getting to know them so well that everything that you do is keeping your student at this, the student that you have at this moment in your classroom, and how to teach them the best way possible. It opened professional doors. We know also that, and specifically in Kentucky, that a lot of our NBCTs are often chosen as leaders in their school and district. They become instructional coaches. A lot of them also choose to become administrators. And then the financial benefit is, as you know, we have a change of rank. So as a new teacher, you enter as a rank 3. Once you become a national board teachers, you have now the possibility to earn a rank 2. If you're a rank 2, you can get a rank 1. And then there is a yearly salary supplement of $2,000 as long as you keep on teaching in the area of your national board certification at least 50% of the time. Next slide, please. And I'm going pretty quickly because I don't want to take too long. But if you do have any question, I will be glad to answer any of those. So what does it mean in terms of eligibility? Who can apply to become a national board certified teacher? Well, you need to have a bachelor's degree. You need to have a valid Kentucky state teaching license. And then you need to have, by the end of the process, not at the beginning like it used to be. Nowadays, by the end of the process, you need to have 3 years of classroom or school counselor experience. So you can start the first year, but and then the grant is for 2 years. And at the end of that, you will become a national board certified teachers once you have that 3-year experience. Next slide. So what does a grant cover? Well, the grant cover all the professional learning and financial support. And again, this is for 100 teachers in Kentucky that have 1 to 3 year teaching experience. So they will have to commit to take component 1 and 2 by May 2023, and component 3 and 4 by May of 2024. So what are those components? The components are, the first one is content knowledge. It's a test on your pedagogical practices, but also your content knowledge. Component 2 is differentiation in instruction. So the teachers will have to analyze and submit a classroom-based portfolio using student sample. And then component 3 is your teaching practice and learning environment. This is where the teachers will videotape an interaction with their students while they are teaching. And then they have to write a reflective piece to explain what they did in their instruction. Component 4 is just to show that you are on your way to become an effective and reflective practitioner. So we are doing it in 2 years because we also understand that new teachers have a lot of other pool on their time, and they're also trying to get to know their not only their students, but also the whole culture of the school and the district. And for some people, even the community, if they are brand new to this part of Kentucky. They need to be willing to commit at least 3 hours a week. We know that going through the process is pretty demanding on your time because you have to start, I think, analyzing and reflecting on everything you do. And then what is covered is your all the components will be paid. The only thing they will have to pay is a $75 registration fee. So next slide. So applications are already open and I have the link. They will be closing at the end of September. And of course, this link of time is pretty short, but it's about getting them started because they will have to start paying, the $75 registration fee, but also they need to be registered for their component 1 and 2 by February. So the application will take about an hour to fill. There is a reflective piece in there. It is open, like I say, for 100 applicants. So if you are interested and you fall within that range of experience, or if you already have somebody in mind that this is their years and you know that they will be able to do this, go ahead and share it with them. And then we're going to have on the 13th, which is today, at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, there will be a webinar explaining more in detail. And we'll have a question and answer part of it about if anybody is interested and need to have more information. So if you have any question whatsoever, I think I'm within my time. If you have any question whatsoever, go ahead and contact me. I will be more than glad to answer any question or send applications if you have somebody in mind which you think would be perfect for this. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to talk about this unique and exciting opportunity in Kentucky. I wish you a great, great year.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. We appreciate you. Are there any questions for her right now? If anyone has a question, just unmute.
Yes, I do. Sarah Green, Fayette County. So my question is, are there other opportunities for teachers who are beyond 3+ years for financial assistance?
Not at the moment, I'm sorry. This was a grant through the national board, but you may want to ask. Every district is different, and some districts do offer either financial support, or they may also offer a sub for the days where, like, for example, if you're videotaping or you're writing that reflective piece, I do know that some districts offer a sub for that day. So go ahead and contact your district office, and they will be, able to answer that question.
All right, thank you. I do know that KEA offers scholarships for national board stuff too. So if you're a member of that, that might be something to look into as well. And we could maybe send that link out later. But thank you. Are there any other questions? Good one. All right, thank you, Jocelyn, so much. We appreciate you, and that was some great information and a good opportunity for our new teachers. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Joanna Stevens, who is our new Kentucky School Board ex officio teacher member from Garrett County Schools. I think you guys will, some of you who went through the process of going through those applications might know a little bit about her. So Joanna, could you welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself and how the school board is going now?
I don't see her name on the list.
Is she with us, Stacy?
Well, I checked and I do not think so. I have sent her an email. She did accept the calendar invitation. So it may be a school issue. She's in school today and she was getting some coverage for her class.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I did not see that. All right. Well, then we'll come back to her. If you see her pop in, will you let me know?
I will.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's skip on down then to the next item on that agenda, which is Dr. Vetta Stewart and Aaron Ashcraft. Are you all in here?
We are here.
Okay.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Awesome. I will hand it over to you talking about teacher retention initiatives. This is one of the questions that we had from our members when we sent out a email asking for topics for this session. And this is obviously a big issue we have to deal with. So thank you for being here, and I'll hand it over to you guys.
Well, thank you for inviting us. And I am Dr. Vetta Stewart, and Aaron we're with the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development. I'm the division director, and Aaron is our capable and competent assistant director. And so we thank you for the invitation to share about teacher retention. And so next slide, please. So just want to start just with some background, because when we start to talk about retention, one of the things that we as a division are always discussing is that recruitment and retention are hand in hand. Your retention plan is what is the precursor to your retention plan, because we want to start out with a strong retention plan to have great retention for our teachers. And so we just feel like there are things that can't be separated out, but we need both strategies for both to help with both the recruitment efforts and for teachers to stay in the profession. And we really talk about being proactive rather reactive. You know, we hear teacher shortage and we hear the growing concerns and needs, but we want to be aware of the trajectory that we need in our plans in advance, so that we can retain our high quality teachers, so that we can have high quality people entering the profession and with the desire to stay in the profession for long term. So in our office, we talk about from recruitment to retirement, and that's our goal when we're for those coming into the profession. Next slide. So when we discuss retention, we know it's complex. And we just simply mean that there is not a one size fit all for every district. There are so many varying factors, whether it's rural or urban, whether it's small or large, well, it's economically stable, or whether it's economically challenged. There are contributing factors that we have to address based on what we call the context of the local community. And because there are localized facts, and that's why it's important for us to undergird the local district in developing their strategies and plan for recruitment and retention. We have to recognize that there are different issues that arise and that they require creative thinking by the community where teachers are going to serve and where they are serving. And therefore, it's just wise for us to not try to handle the concerns with a one set of narrow strategies, because there are unique circumstances for every local school. Where one may have a clear teacher shortage, another may be struggling with teacher distribution or demand, while still there may be others that struggle with subject areas that are in critical need. And again, as we say in education, there's not a magic wand, especially at the state, that we can wave over teacher employment and engagement issues, but we have to be very strategic. Teacher retention requires all of us, especially those of you who are currently serving in the field as in-service teachers, to be solution driven. We have to work together and in unison to create the environments for teachers, for educators to enter and stay in the profession. So I just feel like we're looking at this as a country, and we have to look at it as a state, and then really localize it into our districts. Really look at the complexity of teacher retention with a wide lens, but focus on the conditions we see in our own backyard. Lastly, is the construct. It's also about from day one when we are recruiting, we have to think intentionally about retention barriers and obstacles. That can't be an afterthought. We are investing from the moment we have a new hire, a new educator, in their retainment. And so we have to offer high levels of support, looking at their needs proactively in order to protect our investment. And so we talk about that as a statewide umbrella of supports for the local community. I'm always talking about the localized community because that's where the rubber meets the road. Next slide. So said all that to say, again, we cannot take blanket strategies and apply them across the board, but we have to engage in the right approach for the unique aspects of the local community. Again, as a state, I just don't feel like we can take a paintbrush and paint every district the same, but we have to offer guidance and facilitate best practices and administer equitable approaches for distinct and diverse needs throughout our state. So what are the areas we've learned that require intentionality and can be areas for us to perform needs assessment? Places where the trends tell us that if we focus on, we can improve the trajectory of our educator workforce. So culture, how we do things and our traditions matter. All those hidden rules, all those things that are in our communities that come to life in our communities. The climate, that's just the feeling and the atmosphere that's perpetuated on a day-to-day basis in our schools, in our districts, in our communities. The collegiality is something that we need to focus on, the mutual respect and accountability that allows for the internal efficacy of teachers. Then we talk about the commonality, the shared goals and desired outcomes with the spirit of collaboration that is needed in the profession for us to stay strong and to keep those high quality teachers in place. There is the connectedness, having those ties, those roots, and those healthy relationships is critical. Of course, the community, the environment, the landscape has to be inviting. And contrary to popular belief, teachers do have a life outside of school. Yeah, and so they're looking for welcoming and culturally astute and safe communities to reside in. And then we can't go without talking about compensation. Without question, a living wage that meets the cost of living challenges is imperative. But so we've given you the background. Next, we want to move from background of the current challenges to what are some tangible ways we are supporting and can support schools in their efforts related to recruitment and retention. Erin will lead us into some actionable stages of this work.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We're just so happy to be here and talk through some of these things with you all. And so I'm going to speak on some of the programs from our division, and namely Go Teach KY, which is kind of our primary emphasis in educator recruitment and development. But as you can see from our graphic here, and as Vita mentioned, we are thinking and looking through the lens of supporting and elevating educators from recruitment through retirement. And so when we think, recruitment and retention are kind of the twofold pieces of this conversation. But as you can see from the cycle that goes around, it's recruitment and then into our educator preparation programs, into induction as you enter the workforce and kind of transition from being a pre-service teacher to an in-service teacher, and then ultimately retention and all of those factors that Vita just spoke to. And then we want to promote growing our own, cycling back up to recruitment again by encouraging our current students to consider teaching as a future profession. So then it just kind of starts the cycle over again, and that really our mission is focused on equitable access to effective educators for all Kentucky students. That is really where we always come back to at the end of the day, is that every child in Kentucky has equitable access to a great teacher. Next slide, please. So we are excited to kind of come up or be able to frame exactly what the priorities of Go Teach KY were. And Dr. Glass was able to share this with the Interim Joint Committee for Education earlier this summer. And it's really this 5-point strategy of encouraging early entry, elevating the teaching profession, engaging in actionable supports, employ strategies to certification, and then entice to stay in the profession. So all of our different projects and programs in our division are all anchored to one of these parts of the teacher pipeline. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. Just kind of created a chart here to offer a list of some of the specific programs available in each of these. So for encouraging early entry, we're talking about Grow Your Own programs. And those are things like Educators Rising and the Teaching and Learning Career Pathway. So Educators Rising is a recognized career and technical student organization in Kentucky, which is pretty great because that makes us eligible for federal Perkins funding when you have a CTSO in combination with a CTE career pathway. So think agriculture, ag classes, and FFA, or family and consumer science, FCCLA. When you have this 2-part system, then that plugs us into the career and technical education funding sources, and it's good stuff. We know that CTE works for students, and so our own profession can lean into that. And John Pays is his information is linked there below. If you would like to find out more about getting Educators Rising started in your high school, in your local district, please feel free to reach out to him. He is great at doing visits. He will come out and see you, and he is everybody's best friend. So John is a great partner, and he really cares a lot about this work. And Amanda is in the comments with a John shout out. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, he will take care of you. So if you are interested in getting those programs available for students in your school, let's get that done, because it's funny. It so often seems that we're not great promoters of our own profession. And so it just some interesting kind of conversations that have come up through Go Teach KY of having a career fair and not having anything about education there, or offering different future career options for students to select from, but education isn't one. So sometimes it's that notion of we can't see the forest for the trees, or we don't self-protect. I'm not sure what it is, but really making sure that education is elevated with all of those future careers that we present to our students. And that leads right into elevating the teaching profession overall. We just want the teaching profession to be one that is aligned with respect and the recognition that it deserves. And so we use our ambassadors, and Claire is an ambassador, and Jamal Stiles, one of our former ambassadors. I hate to mention names because I'm probably going to miss somebody. If there's other Go Teach KY ambassadors in here, we love our ambassadors. Such an exciting group, and we are getting ready to drop our applications for our fourth round of ambassadors. Those will be open in just a couple of days on the 15th. So keep an eye on Go Teach KY on social media, which is another way that we are seeking to elevate the teaching profession. So Go Teach KY, it's just at Go Teach KY all together. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and always trying to elevate the our teachers in Kentucky. And I'm actually going to put this link in the chat, bit.ly Go Teach KY Spotlight. Please fill that out and share that with your friends, because this is how we get our faces in the field. And pre-service teachers, if you've got student teachers, have them. We love to our Future Teacher Fridays, retired teachers, anybody that is a teacher in Kentucky, we would love to highlight you on Go Teach KY. I've listed Justin Edwards there. Ellie is really our communications and social media guru, but Justin is the head of the ambassador program, and he does all the logistics and coordinating and takes good care of those folks. And so again, our applications for our fourth cohort of ambassadors will be released in just a couple of days. So keep an eye on social media for that. And then engaging in actionable supports. We're really trying to create things that districts and schools can take and put to use. So things like recruitment tips, things like new teacher support, mentoring and induction. We've been able to offer some grant funding for that through ESSER to the districts and to our Ed Prep programs. But there's also at Go Teach KY, which Allison put in the chat, thank you for that. There is, under Elevate the Teaching Profession, there's a school counselor toolkit, and that is really built as a series of tools to talk to somebody about becoming a teacher, whether that's a student or a career changer. There's some really useful tips and strategies there. And one of our kind of future projects we're cooking is a recruitment and retention toolkit for districts to put to use. Ellie has also offered some office hours. But if you know somebody in your district that leads things like marketing or your HR, puts out your job openings, those kinds of things, send them to Ellie, and she would be happy to workshop and kind of brainstorm some ways to make sure that you maximize putting that information out. And then on employing strategies to certification, we're really just trying to figure out what those barriers are that we can address from the state level. So things like the praxis, that's a real roadblock for a lot of folks on their way to teacher certification, whether it's just that they need some skilling up, or if they need somebody to help kind of review that information with them, or if it's financial, just legitimately the cost, if you have to retake the test, that's a real barrier that presents itself for individuals. So we have available through the CATE, the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching, and in partnership with CKEC, we do have a praxis support program available where individuals can be connected with a mentor, and they can also receive reimbursement for their praxis exam fees. And I'll also dig up that link and throw that in the chat for everybody. So it has previously been only individuals currently enrolled in an educator preparation program that were eligible to apply. And starting on October 1st, that will expand to K-12 district employees. So acknowledging that we do have paraprofessionals on staff who have completed a program but just have not yet passed the praxis. And so that will include individuals currently enrolled in Ed Prep, and those who are K-12 district employees will be able to sign up and receive mentoring and reimbursement for praxis exams. That's both the core to be admitted to an Ed Prep program and the Praxis 2 for certification. Additionally, scholarships. Kia offers a teacher scholarship, and we are in the works of potentially reworking that a little bit, but that is currently available. And so just trying to promote different opportunities that we see or that are shared with us. So if you know anything, send that information. Pick anybody on the team. We'll get it to where it needs to go. But if you know about scholarships or anything that we can help promote from Go Teach KY, we'd love to share that. And then again, ESSER and the American Recovery Plan projects, all of our projects that we were able to touch as a division have been focused on Grow Your Own, on PEEP, which is our Project Early Entry Plan, and trying to push teacher recruitment clubs and activities down even into elementary and middle schools. And then also STEP was Support Teacher Engagement and Professional Pipeline, and that was focused on getting any adult in and around our schools, whether they are pre-service teachers, paraprofessionals, substitute teachers, getting them across the finish to teacher certification. So we're really excited to see those contracts. All of those grant funds have been awarded, and contracts will be starting around October 1st. So excited to see what all of those districts come up with that funding. And then lastly, Entice to Stay in the Profession. And there is the lovely Jocelyn Waddle, who you all heard of heard from a few minutes ago. But she is our guru for teacher leadership, teacher voice, national board, and really rank advancement. So any ways that we can ensure that our teachers are climbing career ladders, are gaining additional rank, and things that will, again, entice us to stay in the profession. So Jocelyn is our head for those types of projects. And then, of course, down at the bottom, we've got Dr. Stewart's contact information, and then also our webpage, Go Teach KY, and that's the KDE web pages that are educator development and equity web pages, which are also very informative. So this is kind of a reference card. So feel free to save this slide, and this is kind of our Go Teach KY calling card, so to speak. So next one. Share some, and these are some specific resources I also wanted to share on the our wonderful P3 team, who Stacy and Allison and Keith are our principal partnership projects. We did have a partnership with the Urban Schools for Human Capital Alliance, and got to work with them over the past couple of years. Michael Moore was kind of our state liaison, and he's just a real expert on these topics of teacher recruitment and retention. And they expanded from just urban schools to working with full states. And so we had the great benefit of working with them. There's an entire toolkit dedicated to induction, recruitment, and retention. There are surveys, like temperature check surveys, protocols, checklists, all number of resources that you can, and they're in a Google Drive, and you can make a copy of and use and download to help support induction, recruitment, and retention. There are also some webinar recordings of Michael Moore going through those different, so that entire webpage is just tremendously useful, and lots of good stuff there. Then there's also the Impact Kentucky Working Conditions Survey. We took this for this in the what is time? November and December of last year. And so the results are available at impactky.org, and those are publicly available. You don't have to have an account to get in and review those different information. Lots of good information there. And if you go to the resource hub, there's great modules, and one is specific to elevating teacher voice to improve climate. So Dr. Stewart and I, we spoke to, it seems like about the some point about the Impact Kentucky survey with TAC, but there, again, lots of great modules and resources there for using that local data to really digging into what's going on in your school building and figuring out how to address some of those issues. And then lastly, the teacher leadership framework. This was produced by and for Kentucky teachers. It's a few years ago now, but there are 6 specific spheres of leadership that are identified. And so really pushing beyond the idea of the only way to be a teacher leader is to have a K-TIP intern or a student teacher, and thinking about the different ways and all of the different skills that we bring as individuals to the table and to our schools and how we can push those out. So take a look at that teacher leadership framework if you haven't before, and there might be some interesting ways your school or district may leverage those to help retain and elevate our teachers. I think that might be the end of what I had to share, Stacy. So yeah, so that is what we've got coming from Go Teach KY, but as we're also happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything for us.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. I have a quick question. Are there any specific targeted retention strategies from this, specifically dealing with like our educators of color, trying to recruit more folks into the profession?
Yes, we're always trying to look at the diverse needs of our districts. And again, like I said, that is very localized in helping our districts to really form those laser focused strategies for diverse teachers. But that is always at the top of mind for us, really having that our student population mirrored in our teacher population. So that is always top of mind for us, but it's really in the localized communities where we're able to identify those strategies. We always go back to that it's in the districts where we look at their needs and the trends in their communities and how we help them to develop those nuances and strategies to really focus on their needs for their students.
I was going to say, I'm at Beechwood and NKU. Someone from NKU reached out to us to see if there was a student that was interested in a scholarship for diverse needs. So I agree with Dr. Stewart that it's, I think, just localized is where you're going to find those scholarships. So if you reach out to the individual colleges of education, I think you'll find them there.
I also will include this link. This is the teacher equity report from KY Stats. And this goes through, it's static data. It is based on the 2013 graduating cohort. But what we can do with this data is look at the teacher career continuum and kind of see what's happening to our students at different critical junctures along the career pipeline. So there's graduation, going to post-secondary, declaring education as a major, being admitted to an ed prep program, reaching completion, reaching certification, being employed, and then being employed, being retained. So, and you can switch the different groups into gender, race, free and reduced price lunch eligibility, and Appalachian, and kind of look at some of those different groups. So that is something that we are looking at from the state level of where are those gaps emerging. So if we're cruising along and things are pretty much in line and proportionate to the original student population, that's fine. But then where does the big drop off happen? And then what's going on there and how can we address that? And then at the top of that report, there is also a student teacher diversity tab that looks into each district and really compares the student population to the teacher workforce. And you can really drill down, even see individual schools there and kind of see what the discrepancies are in demographics between the teacher population and the student population. And then the last tab at the top is the diversity tab. And that is, we are tracking the teaching and learning career pathway student enrollment. So you can see the enrollments from 2018 and 2019. And what we see that's really exciting here is that our students who are enrolled in the teaching and learning pathway, particularly in regards to race, are much more aligned with our current student population, and certainly more diverse than our current teacher workforce. So we're seeing some promising trends in our students who are interested in teaching through the pathway.
Awesome. That's exciting news. Very cool. Thank you for sharing all of that, all of you. Are there any other questions from our members? If so, just unmute.
It's Scott Osborne, Lawrence County. How are you? Got two questions. First off, Is it recommended or mandated that each school district in Kentucky have sort of a district level induction, recruitment, and retention team? Is that an expectation at all? And what would be the best makeup of such a team in a particular school district, whether rural or urban?
I don't know that it's mandated. I think induction programs are a little different. I know at district level that there are induction programs, recruitment and retention. Of course, that is our jam. So we are hoping, we are highly recommending that is a part of every district. But that's not something that our office it has a mandate over or as of right now, but strongly encourage, and we want to work with. And if there is, districts that need support in that, of course, we are available to support them in those areas. But that is, I'm sure every district has that. I'm just being very hopeful that all that have that. And the makeup, again, that would be something that would be localized to your community and the needs that you see. But of course, we know that leadership on teams like that are important, because leadership is where it starts. And so we want to have a diverse team, and a team that has very innovative and creative perspectives.
Do you have more, Scott?
Yeah, just one follow. Thank you, though. That's a localized approach. Always, at least in my opinion, is the best approach. Follow up is that a lot of teaching's only one of the service professions that's experiencing shortages. I'll draw a comparison to the United States military is actually, I think it's the worst recruiting year since 1973. I know the United States Army, because I believe it has the largest recruiting goals, is considering, lowering some standards, not requiring a high school diploma or a general equivalency, perhaps lowering the minimum ASVAB test scores, and even lowering some of the physical minimum requirements to qualify. How do we resist lowering standards? I know that's something, you hear about the deprofessionalization of teaching. How do we resist those same pressures that the military is struggling with?
I think that's something that we are trying to be very thoughtful about, where it is, again, that the barriers are emerging and what it is that we can do to address the need. So for example, with the praxis support program, rather than saying, well, let's lower our score drop or let's take that out, we are saying, let's find current teachers that we can provide a stipend to. So now we're helping both ends and providing a leadership opportunity to connect with somebody, help impart their wisdom, help skill them up and bring them up to the standard. And then also deal with the financial burden. How can we offload that off of the individual? So I think that is one thing that we are really sticking to. If you are aware of option 9 that passed, one of a new alternative certification pathway out of this past legislative session, that is not that is a requirement or an option that yields a bachelor's degree, and you are classified staff until that is done. So you are not a teacher of record with a high school diploma. So I will say in Kentucky, I think that there is kind of a shared emphasis on not lowering the standards of our teaching profession and continuing to elevate the profession. So that's the answer that I have to give. And hopefully we will be able to stay the course and see. I think what, teacher shortages and this tends to be cyclical, and hopefully we will start working our way back out of this and get away from the stark shortage that we're in right now. But that's my optimistic answer to your question.
Nothing wrong with optimism.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate the question.
So true. Thank you. Any other questions for Vita or Aaron before we let them go? All right. Thank you all so much for that work. Like that was incredibly informative and
Thank you.
and positive, hopeful. So thank you all for doing that. We appreciate that. And
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Joanna, is she with us now, Stacy?
I believe so.
Yes.
So awesome. Let's go back to you and welcome, Joanna. We appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes.
Yes.
So my name's Joanna Stevens. I'm a high school math teacher at Garrett County High School. And this year I am serving as the teacher representative on the Kentucky School Board. So first, I just want to thank you all for your time and using your voice on the Commissioner's Teacher Advisory Council. I know that it's hard to pull away from your class and get this block of time and get coverage and sub-plans. So I appreciate the work that you all are doing and just what little bit I've heard. It's definitely very important as we do have a crisis when we're talking about our teacher workforce. But as far as my board report, my first official meeting was the August meeting. We met for a retreat at Lake Cumberland State Park. So all of the board members and the KDE team, we were there for 2 days where we had 2 days of meetings, but then we also had a boat ride on Lake Cumberland. So a lot of the time that we spent there was on the United We Learn. And those big 3 priorities that we have. So if you can get the next slide there. And focusing on making our classrooms more vibrant for every student that's in our room, encouraging innovation, and then collaborating with our communities and going out and bringing in all stakeholders to be a part of the learning process that we have. And I know that you've probably heard about United We Learn, but it's a good reminder that this is not a top-down initiative, that this was a result of the commissioner going around holding his listening meetings. And I think I described this on the next screen. But that it's really he was hearing the voices from students, from teachers, from parents, and from community members about the most urgent needs that we had in Kentucky. And I think he had a total of 13 different meetings that he held. And now we have the United We Learn report. And that is, we spent the main part of the first day digging into the United We Learn and just the vision that we wanted to have for our students. So the next screen. So we spent a lot of time doing some group activities. So it felt more like this board meeting felt more like class activities than our typical meetings did. But I think you all will appreciate like everything took longer. So when I attended my first board meeting in June, I was very impressed with how everything was very timed. We're going to spend 5 minutes on this, 3 minutes on this. But when we did these activities in groups and like partner pair shares, that it all took longer, just like it does in the classroom. That if I teach very traditionally and we do, you do, I can get through a lot more content. But when I give my students time to dig in and discuss and do that deeper learning, it does take longer, but it is more valuable. So as the teacher rep, I thought that was funny and also very real world that we experienced that in our meeting, that our discussions all took longer because we were really diving in. And something I enjoyed that we did, and I am a math teacher, so I'm coming from that data background, is the commissioner provided us with some little cards that had different data just on how the world has changed. Most of it was in the last decade, but some of it was more recent, last 2 to 3 years. And we just talked through those different issues and how they affected our schools. And then also he gave us 4 different scenarios for what future schools could look like, very different than what we have now. And we discussed how we would need to adapt as a state board, as a Department of Education, as teachers. What would we need to do differently if any of these scenarios happened? Not saying that they would happen, but if they did, how would we need to change? And that's kind of where the United We Learn comes from, is the world is changing. And so we need to change to make sure our students are best prepared. And we want to make sure that all of our students are getting everything they need. So we're hoping with the United We Learn that it's going to be a collaborative effort where we're sharing the best ideas with everyone around. So I'll keep going on the next one. So some exciting news since our last board meeting is Kentucky was awarded $3 million to help advance the innovations for the state assessment and accountability system. And I know as a teacher, talking to my colleagues, there's a lot more buy-in towards new ideas when we know that that's going to affect our accountability system. So it's hard to encourage deeper learning moments in the classroom when I know that my students are still going to take their standardized tests at the end of the school year. So with this grant, we're hoping that we can revise that assessment system so that it's going to highlight those features of United We Learn. And then the next steps, we are inviting people to join or to apply to be on the United We Learn Council. So that way we can have the competency-based education model with lots of voices being heard there. Then we spent some time with the proposal of the statewide portrait of a graduate, and this is a proposal. So this is a draft. We've actually discussed making some edits here, and I know that committee has met since our last board meeting, so they'll be reporting at the next one. But right now, that portrait of a graduate, we're looking for critical thinkers, effective communicators, empowered learners, engaged citizens, and productive collaborators. So I know in our discussions, there's more thoughts on adding the innovator component to that, since that's such a big piece of United We Learn. We want that to be a piece of the portrait of a graduate. We did talk, and we had some different districts around the state highlighted of their portraits or their backpacks. Different districts are calling it different things, of systems that are already in place, and how we can look at those when we're making a statewide portrait of a graduate and what that would look like. So next slide there. Some other topics that we focused on at our meeting. Coming up in October, we do have the state release of the test scores. And so we heard from the continuous improvement team, and they did just kind of an overview of what that turnaround process looks like for schools, for districts who are identified as needing assistance from the state. My last school was a PLA school, bottom 10%. So I went through that process. So hearing about it from the state level, about what they wanted to accomplish, and then knowing what happened in the school, it was neat to see I benefited as a teacher, my students benefited, but there were also some gaps and things from my perspective of maybe I didn't understand the purpose of everything we were doing. And then we talked a lot about the virtual learning environment, and we even heard from the Bullet Virtual Learning Academy. So with some new policies that are in effect, that we can now have virtual learning K through 12, and we have learned from COVID that we do have a need for that, for the virtual learning, but our focus was on addressing the whole child. That we want to make sure that we're meeting their academic needs as well as their social and emotional needs while they're virtual learning. So making sure there's guidelines for districts as they roll out these plans. We also heard, I think maybe Barron County had representatives there to share from programs from districts who've been doing it a little longer. And then we had a big report from KETS, our technology gurus who make everything go every day, and we're very grateful for everything they do. But they had some really good breakdowns of where the money was being spent, of the importance of the digital literacy for our students. Personally, I enjoyed seeing that KETS started in 1992, which is when I entered Kentucky Public Schools as a kindergarten student. So reading through that timeline and seeing all those changes and remembering when we got computers in the classroom and things like that, not only from the teacher perspective, but from the student, from the learner, that was interesting to see. We did talk about their budget, and they are receiving more money than ever. And also the concern that a lot of schools are using ESSER funds right now to cover all the technology needs that we had with COVID, and wanting to make sure that when that money does run out, that we continue to fulfill those technology needs, because those are going to keep growing. Those will not be going anywhere. So that's kind of a summary of our 2-day meeting that we had. We meet again in October. And we will be traveling to Logan County for this meeting, and we will be touring their ATC. They have a new ATC, so we will be taking a look at that. But I think I have 5 minutes before my next class walks in. So do you all have any questions for me?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead if you have a question. Oh, hers was reading. Okay, sorry. I had a quick question. Thank you so much for this rundown of what's going on. My question for you though is, as the teacher representative on the school board, what way are you going to connect with teachers across the state to let them to hear and elevate our voices? Do you have a plan in mind for that? And how can we, as this council, how can we help you or be a part of that? Let's do that.
That's a good question, and I would welcome your feedback on that, on what you think. I've talked to Allison Sloan, who is the Facebook queen. She was the last board rep, and she did an excellent job of putting things out on Facebook. So we've talked about utilizing that, but I will take your ideas on what you have for the best way to communicate with our teachers.
I definitely think that utilizing this council and this committee as much as you can, and maybe staying in connection with us, and we can think about looping you into the email circle and figure out how we do that and what would be best, because we have representatives, like geographical representatives from all over the state in this spot, and so we would definitely love to be a part of that conversation, and that's something. Anyone have any other suggestions or ideas on how we move forward with that? Or any other suggestion or thoughts or questions for Ms. Stevens? Okay, well, how about I'll send you an email and we'll chat some, and we'll send it in the group and let you get back to your class before your kids come in. And thank you for taking that time. We appreciate you so much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, so next up, let's see, I'm out of line. Are we on, Stacy, are we to the
We are on,
science?
yes, science standards revision process.
All right, awesome. So we have Thomas Klaus with us. Is he here? Talk about the science.
Crystal Rowland.
Oh, sorry, Crystal Rowland. Are you there, Crystal?
I think we're both here. We're both here.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'll hand it over to you guys. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. All right, good morning. I'm Crystal Rowland. I'm the director of the Division of Program Standards, and I'm joined today by Thomas Klaus, who's our academic core branch manager, and we are both in the Office of Teaching and Learning. At this time, the Kentucky Academic Standards for Science and Visual Performing Arts are open for their regular review process. And so we wanted to provide you with an update on the process today, and also gather some ideas from you around supports that you might recommend for implementing the revised standards once they are approved.
Crystal, I'm sorry to interject, but did you want to share the slide deck? Because I can stop sharing. I just had a request.
Best for you.
I'll be happy to stop sharing, and then you can share.
Okay.
If that's what, yeah. I just didn't see that request to share until after I'd already started. I apologize.
Oh, okay. So, so we wanted to kind of come to you today to really share that process with you and then find out from you how we can help to support teachers in the field when those new revised standards come out for implementation. Hold on, let me. Yes. So this process for standards review is actually outlined in KRS 1586453, and it calls for each content area to be reviewed every 6 years on a rotating basis. And as part of that process, we developed 3 advisory panels and a review committee, and these are primarily made up of teachers in the field that serve on these committees. Teachers apply to be a part of the committees, and they're selected so that we have regional representation from across the state. But they take on the very challenging and rewarding work of looking at feedback, survey feedback that is received from across the state of Kentucky for the content area and responding to that feedback. And then those standards are open. On the current standards, it's open for 30 days at the beginning of the process. And then once a draft is created, then there's another 30-day comment period that is opened up for additional feedback. Primarily, we get feedback from teachers in the field. And so that's one of the reasons why we're excited to be here with the Advisory Council today to follow up with some of that feedback. We know that teachers really would like supports around implementing the standards, professional learning specifically. And so as we are kind of sharing an update on the process and where we've come to with the science standards revision, we want you all to be considering again what those supports might look like to best support teachers in your area. So at this time, I'll hand it off to Thomas, who will give us kind of a rundown of where we've come from so far and where we still have to go for science and also for visual and performing arts.
Thanks, Crystal. So the process for the revision of the science standards started with a couple of things happening. One, an application was sent out to fill those advisory panels and the review committee that Crystal mentioned. At the same time, a public comment survey was sent out to get feedback on the current Kentucky academic standards for science. In the spring of 2021, the advisory panels and review committees came together to set their vision for that work. And then kicking off in the summer, those committees began responding to that feedback. This July, the committees wrapped up a draft of the Kentucky academic standards. And at that time, another public comment survey went out to get feedback on the draft standards. And at the same time, there was focus groups with different education stakeholders to get additional feedback. The AP and RCs were brought back in August 2022 to respond to the public feedback, both from the survey and as well as the focus groups. Our next steps moving forward is to go before the Interim Joint Committee on Education, and then the Standards and Assessment Review Process Review Committee. And really what those will do is really make sure that the process outlined in KRS 1586453 was followed, and that we provided opportunities for education stakeholders to give feedback on these standards. After that, we are tentatively scheduled to put the standards before the Board of Education in December 2022. And just before we move over to a little VPA update, I do want to just thank the educators and teachers who are part of this process. You know, over the last couple of years, as you all know, it's been very difficult managing COVID, and finding release time to have these meetings that rely on quorum has been difficult. So I just really am appreciative of the educators who are part of this work, because it is difficult but important work, and they've stuck with it for a while to ensure that the document is clear, concise, and usable by educators. We can move to a little bit of a VPA update. So our Kentucky Academic Standards for Visual Performing Arts review and revision process is still is really getting into the second gear, but that process began last December with that feedback survey going out. There was an application that went out for AP&RC, and we had those groups selected, and again, made sure that we had representation across the different disciplines of EPA, but also across the different geographic regions of Kentucky. They had their initial vision meeting in June 2022, and since then they've been working on responding to public feedback, and they're actually meeting over the next 2 days, well, tomorrow and Thursday, to have their the next round of meetings. So looking forward to that work continuing and that process continuing for the visual and performing arts.
And I want to echo Thomas's sentiment of just appreciation to the teachers who serve on these committees. It is a long work, it is important work, and we do recognize that it is much more difficult with things being as they are to get release time to participate, but it is so valuable and critical to this process. So we have deep appreciation for those that serve on these committees. I wanted to share on the KDE website, we do have a standards review timeline that gives you an idea of each of the content areas that are reviewed and when they are expected to begin that revision process and to end the revision process. So as you can see, science and visual performing arts are open currently for their regular scheduled review process. If you look on the second page here, you'll see that there are several content areas that were approved. They were adopted in 2019. And so on that 6-year cycle, they kind of come up at the same time to begin the review process, which can be problematic because they would all be implemented at the same year. And so we do have tentative dates to begin the review process for those content areas in the hopes of helping to spread out those implementation years as much as possible to help support implementation in the field. So I want to circle back to our question of how might the KDE support the field in science and VPA standards implementation. And so I would love to just open the floor at this point and give people the opportunity to share your ideas and thinking around implementing the standards and what supports might be helpful for teachers.
If anyone has any thoughts, please go ahead and unmute and jump in.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Taylor Sullivan. I'm a science teacher in Boone County. So I'm very interested in what we will end up seeing out of this revision process. I was very involved in some of the initial rollouts of how do we do NGSS. That was when I entered the field. So it's kind of near and dear to my heart, but also, excited to see comments and how this would change. But I guess what I don't quite still understand is how much change would we expect to come from this revision thing? And then if it is a large amount of change, different trainings for those of us who were well-versed before, what to kind of crosswalk any shifts that we would be seeing would be my idea of what would be helpful. But if you could maybe let us know, what are we anticipating on scale of changes from this process?
That is a good question, and I like the recommendation of those that are already science leaders in their areas, having specific training tailored directly for them in what those shifts are in the revised standards. I think above all else, the feedback was around usability of the standards document, and so I feel like the major revisions are in making it more user-friendly and more understandable for those that are teaching the standards.
And just to echo one other thing is just the importance of ensuring that the document is ADA accessible and 508 compliant.
Yes.
So there were some structural changes to ensure that the committee's made some structural changes to ensure that that was compliant.
Okay, so we would be anticipating seeing the 3 dimensions continuing forward, the performance expectations, but making it more user appropriate and friendly for implementation. Okay,
Yes.
That's wonderful news. We also, in my district, are moving towards standards-based instruction. So a lot of our work has been improving on how do we assess the practices and cross-cuttings in addition to content. So I am encouraged. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you all so much. We appreciate you all coming and speaking to us and letting us know about that today. So thank you so much. And I think you have a slide here for questions and with your emails on it.
Yes. So I will stop sharing if you want to bring the slide deck back up. Our contact information is in the slide deck as well. So you can email us with any questions that you may have about the process or any ideas that you may have that come up after our meeting today. But I just want to say thank you for having us and thank you for your time in serving on this very important council.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys so much, Crystal and Thomas. We appreciate you. Next up, we have Karen Dodd to speak to us about United We Learn. Karen, are you on?
I am. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I am the Chief Performance Officer at KDE, so I oversee strategic planning and research for the department. And you heard a lot of what I was going to talk about today from Joanna as she gave you a debrief on the KBE meeting. But I want to start with, I heard her say, you all have probably heard about United We Learn. I kind of want to take the temperature here. How many of you have heard of the United We Learn vision? So let's use the chat if you don't mind. If you have heard of it, put a 1 in the chat. If you have not, put a 0 in the chat. Seeing some ones in there. That's good. Very good. No zeros so far. Sort of. Okay, that's fair. For those of you who have heard of it, if you feel like you can talk about it to other people and kind of explain it, give me a 2 in the chat. All right, not seeing any 2s come up. Hold on just a second here. All right, so I'm going to give you then a little bit of the background on the United We Learn vision. Let's start, you can go on to the next slide. And you heard Joanna talk a little bit about this. So we started last year, in the spring of last year, the commissioner did his listening tour, and we did have 13 different virtual town hall meetings. The way that it was structured, we had facilitators and we had participants break out into rooms so that we could talk in small groups with all of the participants. And we asked just a few questions, and they were questions like, when was the last time you received feedback on your student? So that would have been geared toward a parent, right? Or if you're a student, when was the last time you received feedback about your performance? Other questions were, when was the last time you felt good about your school? When was the last time you felt like the community and the school were coming together? So there were questions like this, and they were only, like I said, only a few questions, but we really were trying to get the perspective of students, teachers, parents, community members, and all these folks were invited. Anybody that wanted to attend were allowed to attend these meetings, which is why it was virtual. Well, that and the pandemic. But it was really we really wanted to encourage a lot of participation. After that listening tour, in June of 2021, we brought together a coalition. And this coalition was made up of over 60 people who came together and did further questioning, or what we call empathy interviews. All right, so the ways that these questions were presented were really to get people to share stories. So it's not unlike a survey where you say, yes, I love the accountability model, or I absolutely hate the accountability model. This was really about sharing stories and not specifically asking about an accountability model or about student behavior or anything in particular. They are designed for people to share what they like about the system and what could be better about the system. So when we brought this coalition together, which again was over 60 people, we asked them, and you can go on to the next slide, we asked them to do additional empathy interviews. So we gave them the same questions and said, if you're a teacher, feel free to interview other teachers or interview parents or even interview students. We had students involved in the coalition. We asked them to interview their peers or people in their community, whoever they wanted to interview. Go out there and just collect more of these stories. Then those folks broke out into groups and looked at all of those stories. And we broke them out into, okay, these are the things that students are saying. These are the things that parents are saying. These are the things that community members, educators. So we had several different groups that we were looking at. And we wanted to see what were some commonalities in what we're hearing. And so it wasn't just students looking at the student answers. We made sure that we really broke it up and had different stakeholders from different areas looking at each of these compiled responses and stories. And we said, okay, now tell us what they have in common. And what we ended up doing is creating profiles for these different stakeholder groups. And where there were overlaps, that became all part of one profile. But there were lots of areas where there weren't overlaps. So we ended up with multiple profiles for all of these different stakeholder groups. All right, you all with me? Is that making sense to you? So we've got a bunch of student profiles, educator profiles, parent or family member profiles, community, business leaders, etc. Then we asked them, what would it look like if we took out some of the negativity that we're seeing in there and turned it into a positive? So where we're seeing that maybe parents don't feel like they're connected to the school, what would it look like if they did feel connected to the school? If students feel like they're not being seen or their voice isn't heard, what would that look like if they were seen and they were heard? When the questions that were asked around what was the best day that you've ever had in school? And for some people like myself, that's going back a good 30 years, right? But what did that look like? It doesn't matter how long ago it was, because good is good. And when you feel connected, you feel connected, and time doesn't matter. We're trying to share these stories of what is good and what needs to be better. So from there, we had the current state profiles, then created these could be profiles, and then a full report was created out of that. And again, Joanna mentioned this report. In November of, you can go on to, there we go, the Education Summit. So November of 2021, we then held an Education Summit. And this is where we unveiled the United We Learn vision. The report was released. In the report, there's full report and there's an executive report. If you look at the full report, you'll see all of those profiles, both the current state and those could be state profiles. And there's a list of what we call key themes that came out of there. I think we had 10 key themes. And now we're at this point, you can go on to, what do we have next on here? We've got the, oh, I'm sorry, back up one, the council. So where we are right now, we are going to form a United We Learn Council. And again, we want to bring together various stakeholders. We specifically invited some of the folks who were part of that coalition because they have that whole background story. And when we talk about moving forward, we need that voice that reminds us how we got to where we are. So we wanted some continuity. So some of those folks have been invited to come back and join and be part of the coalition, or I'm sorry, part of the council. But we also want some fresh voices because we know that it takes different thinking to get to a different place. So this United We Learn Council will consist of at least 60 people, possibly more, and it will be broken up into 3 groups. And these are the 3 big ideas that have come out of the United We Learn vision. So first being a vibrant learning experience for students. We don't, it's not the typical sit and get anymore. And you all know that. That has been talked about ad nauseum probably. So what does a vibrant learning experience really look like and how do we get there? Well, it's going to take some innovation. So the second group is about innovation, and particularly when it comes to the accountability model. That has to change because we know that a lot of times the way teaching happens is in alignment to how they're going to be assessed and ultimately held accountable. So how can our accountability model look different? How does accountability in the classroom look different than it has in more recent years? And then a third group is going to look at community, because one thing that we really want to make sure we do is continue to involve all the various stakeholders. And so how do we form those really authentic partnerships with all the various stakeholders to make sure that we are still that we are headed in the right direction and accomplishing the things that we want to accomplish? Now, you may have heard of things like the local learning laboratories, or L3s. That is one of the efforts that was born of all of this work. So the work has already started to take a look at what's happening in your schools or in your communities and choose something that you want to change. We're not asking everybody to change everything. We know that every school and every community looks different, and what's painful for you may not be the same thing as your neighbor. So what is it that you as a school and as a community really want to focus on? And in some cases, we've seen where they're focused on specifically on the accountability model. Others are working on a portrait of a learner. So there are different things that they're doing out there, and that's all great. We want to capture all of that, and the L3 work is capturing all of that. But we know that there are more things that can be done, and so this council is going to come together and take it even further. I don't have a ton more detail than that because it's going to require those members to come together to talk about what that's really going to look like. So today we can go on to my guiding questions. We do have an application, and I'm going to put the link in here for you. So if any of you are interested in joining the United We Learn Council, feel free to use this application to apply. But I'm also asking, how do we share this vision more broadly to help people understand and be able to talk about it? And if you could, through your networks, share this application link with people, that would be really helpful too, because we want to involve, and like I said, it's going to be at least 60 people. I know that we've already gotten quite a few applicants, which is great. We want to make sure it's incredibly diverse. We want to make sure that we are hitting all regions of the state and all kinds of stakeholders. So the more we can spread the word that it's out there, the more likely we will probably end up with even more members than 60 on this council. So I'll stop there. And if anybody wants to speak up on ways that you think you can help or things that we should do to spread this vision, please share.
I'm happy to share on our union website, AFT. So I just made myself a note to share it out. Facebook, sorry, or in our emails. We have our member email, so that'll reach lots of people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Okay, Karen, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your time here and doing that work and organizing it. And I'm excited to see how all of this comes together. I was actually texting my department just now, like letting them know what was going on, and we're having a fun little exchange here. It's good. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you so
all.
much. Awesome. Have a great one. Okay, and last up, Stacy, you want to talk about the membership update and the rest of what we're doing here?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right. So as Susan alluded to earlier at the start of the meeting this morning, we do have several members that are rotating off of the TAC group. So want to just give you an update on where we are in that. The application window did close on August the 30th. And so there is a structured process to determine how to fill the individual vacancies that we have, recognizing that our goal, of course, is to cover all of the geographic areas of the state of Kentucky. So by the December meeting, we will have those new members in place, and there'll be a lot of PR, some communication about those chosen members. You'll notice here on the slide deck that we have specific regions that we do have some vacancies in, so you can just kind of get a sense for where we need applicants across the state. And so along those same lines, in terms of getting ready for our upcoming meeting in December, we need to select a TAC chairperson, and that is a one-year term. And Susan has graciously been phenomenal at facilitating and coordinating our TAC meetings for the last year. But recognizing it is a one-year term, we do need to go through the process of selecting a new TAC chairperson. And in terms of how we go about selecting that person, I want to open it up to the TAC members here to make some decisions about that. If you all want to come up with a particular formal process to identify a chairperson for our group, we can certainly do that. We have flexibility. If we wanted to do just like nominating someone who's on TAC right now to serve as chairperson, that would be perfectly okay. Just a lot of flexibility in how we select that person. So I wanted to I'm going to stop sharing to just open it up to the group to get some feedback. What do you think about the process? And I'll just tell you, the last time that we had the chairperson that was selected, how we handled it was, I think it was a volunteer. Yeah, so volunteer is another way that we could do it if somebody wanted to volunteer. If we had multiple people who wanted to volunteer, then we could think about what kind of process we want to use to determine the chairperson. But does anybody have any input regarding that and the process, how you'd like to handle it?
Would it make sense if you just sent out like a Google form if you're interested, and then go from there if someone wants to do like a quick little bio and then we vote? Or
Yeah, we could definitely do that and have a vote at the next meeting. How's that sound? Other folks? You want to put things in the chat if you like that idea, or if you have another thought? Okay, so I see some feedback. I like the idea. Sounds good. All right, great. Okay, so I am happy to to create some kind of Google form, and I'll send that out to everyone. And if you're interested in applying to be the chairperson, then you can respond and do the uploading maybe of a bio and such. Sounds great. And then when we come back together in December, I'll just make sure that we put it on our agenda to do a review of that and determine our TAC chairperson. All right, great. Well, thank you all. It's a great suggestion. Let me just transition back. In the slide deck, there is a direct link to the feedback form for today's meeting, and you can just identify that it is today's meeting. And this same feedback form, it's the same link for all of our meetings, but you just designate by the date. So appreciate
It's in the chat as well, Stacy.
Great. Thank you, Allison.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'm going to turn it back
So
over
is
to
the,
Susan.
sorry,
Yeah,
Stacy. So is the
please.
attendance. If they forgot to do their attendance, that's also located in the chat at the beginning.
I did have a question, Stacy. When you had sent suggestions for what we wanted on the agenda, I think I might not have put it in there, but I think I had mentioned again SB1 and some of the questions concerning SB1, particularly the, I think it was House Bill 138 that was embedded in there with the social studies standards and these core documents, the American Teaching Principles Act. We had talked about it, I think the last meeting, but what we've seen in some districts is, and I just wanted to, and maybe we can add this for next time, get KDE stance. What we're seeing is some districts, well, one district in particular, the school board chair and members and with the superintendent have put out kind of their, I think it was Davis County, basically where they were requiring teachers to post all of their learning materials and reading materials for the next 30 days. And they had referenced the SB1 as their reasoning behind why they were doing this. And so I feel like we need to have a discussion and ask questions of KDE, of how KDE is going to, if they're going to put out some kind of statement, some type of guiding idea of how districts are going to be handling this.
Yeah, I do think, was it in June that we had someone to speak to that a bit, but we just needed to go a little bit further, right?
Yeah,
based
definitely.
on what's occurred during the start of the school year.
Right, because we're starting to see the fallout of this piece of legislation, and I feel like the more that we can inform educators and educator leaders about what to expect and exactly, you know, what was included in SB1, I think would be very helpful. I've only heard of one district going that route, but if I was a betting woman, I have a feeling that other districts are going to follow suit because that bill did put the curriculum decisions in the hands of the superintendent. And so in that case, they're kind of using that broad stroke of power to say, you know, we're requiring you to upload every learning resource that you're using in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you for that input, and I will make sure that we go ahead and add that to our agenda for December. And, you know, as we close, does anybody else have a thought or suggestion about something we want to ensure occurs at our December meeting? Okay, well, then I will turn it back over to Susan for our last item.
All right, that last item is adjourning. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Sarah Green.
Seconded.
I second it. Erica Deal.
Great, then we are all in favor, sorry. Aye. Say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries and we are officially adjourned. Thank you all so much.